Hello and welcome, dear friends, once again at Lit eCity YouTube channel, the channel which helps you in your preparation for NTA NET English exams. Dear friends, we are at present taking a series of some very important questions that matter or QTM series, in which we discuss some very important concepts, writers, frequently asked in NET paper. And in present installation, we will deal with some advanced MCQs on literary theory, that is unit 9th of the prescribed syllabus. So for the day, our first question is, while discussing various types of novels, Raymond Williams defines this type of novel as a work which explores the relationship between individuals and society, but which lacks the dimension of substantial society. In fact, dear friends, let me tell you some background information regarding this concept. Raymond Williams divided novels into two major types and then two further subtypes. And then he presented characteristics of each type of novel. We are talking about a particular type of novel in which there is an exploration of relationship between individual and society, but there is not we can say deeper exploration of society. Our options are social documentary novel, social formula novel, personal documentary novel, and personal formula novel. Now, I hope you understood that these are the four types. In fact, he first divided novels into two types, social and personal, and then documentary and formula. These are subtypes. The answer for this question is social formula novel. And he also, this is also important, he also presents some examples for each type of novel. For example, when he talked about social documentary novel, he says that when it presents a scene of a particular city, particular we can say its characteristic features like sometimes Dickens did in his novels. Social formula novel, in this connection between society and individual is present. And if we talk about personal documentary novel, one good example is A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, and personal formula novel, which is totally detached with the society of its time, which presents just a conception of an individual. That is a personal formula novel, and the prime example being Portrait of the Artist is a Young Man by James Joyce. Dear friends, the second question for the day is, who considered the concept of authorship as the epitome and culmination of capitalist ideology? We all know very well that in the wake of post-structuralist theories, there were very various concepts related with the importance or we can say uselessness of the concept of the author, as various writers gave their theory regarding how author is not important regarding the consideration of a text. So who considered an author to be or the concept of the authorship to be the epitome, the crux, the climax, the highest point and culmination of the capitalist ideology? Our options are Jean-Francois Lyotard, second one is Roland Barthes, third one is Jacques Derrida, and the last is Frederick Jameson. All these are somehow related with, we can say, deconstructing the concept of, or we can say, the hollow place an author occupied in historical, in other critical terms, but their works basically explore and critically undermine the importance of an author to the text. But this particular critic who called an author the epitome and culmination of capitalist ideology is Roland Barthes. Yes, the man who wrote Death of the Author, in which he basically pointed out that no text is authored, every text is open, multiple points, and one reader can enter into a text from any point. How many children had Lady Macbeth. It is a classic example of modern criticism in which the critic mocks the conventional Shakespearean criticism methods employed by critics like A.C. Bradley, who is the author. Now, there were critics like Shakespearean scholars and critics like A.C. Bradley who put more focus on the art of characterization and other information. But this modern critic, he basically lambasted such attempts to evaluate a play on the basis of character studies. Our options are F.R. Lewis, Kenneth Burke, T.S. Eliot, and L.C. Knights. These all are modern critics. They are writers and somehow they are also critics too. And their theories basically involve critical discussion and sometimes especially discussion on works of Shakespeare. How Many Children Had Lady Macbeth is a satirical take on the approach of A.C. Bradley, and it is written by L.C. Knights, who we can say was one of the earliest Marxist critic of England. Next question, dear friend, is in which category does the critical works like Literature as Social Discourse by Roger Fowler fall? Now, Roger Fowler, one of the leading critic of his time, who has given the impetus to a particular particular branch of critical studies. And his work, Literature as Social Discourse, has basically initiated a typical type of literary criticism. Is it critical linguistics? Second option is structuralism. Third is deconstruction. And the fourth one is Marxist literary criticism. Dear friends, I hope this is rather now easy one after looking at the options. We all know that Roger Fowler is also an established linguist. So the correct answer obviously is critical linguistics. Now, what is critical linguistics? It is an approach to the study of language which stresses the close connection between linguistic structure, that is language, and social structure, that is society. So basically he studied between the connection between these two poles. Our next question states, with which of the following new critics the concept of distinction between texture and structure is associated? New critics have developed their own kind of vocab in which they have laid emphasis on terms like paraphrase, heresy of paraphrase, tension, and there are so many terms, close reading, organic structure. Now, texture and structure, this is a distinction made by this famous new critic. Our options are Clint Brooks, second is John Crowe Ransom, third one is W.K. Wimsatt, and the last one is Ivor Winters. All these have contributed a new kind of terms to the critical theories, or we can say literary theory, by their emphasis on the close reading of a text. Now, this texture and structure, it is given by John Crowe Ransom in his famous essay, Criticism as Pure Speculation. Dear friends, actually he says that the structure is the story, object or situation which gives us the basic argument of the poem. Like in Paradise Lost, the story, the object and situation is something which can be easily identified. It is a story of fall of Satan, it is a story of coming of Christ, it is a story of fall of Eden and redemption. And the texture is the thingness of the thing. Once again, thingness is a term which was emphasized and coined by Ransom. The thing by which it is particularized. It may be, in this case of Paradise Lost, heavy Latinized diction, grand similes, epical style. This particular quality makes a work literary. So you can say that this term texture is almost, we can say, something which a formalist critic may say that literary element of a work which makes a poem, which makes a literary work. The next question says that psychology and literature is an important contribution to the psychoanalytic criticism, and in this particular essay the author divides work of art into two categories, the psychological and the visionary. Now, who is the author? Our options are Carl Jung, second one is Simon Freud, third one is Norman Holland, and the last one is Maud Botkin. They all, as you know, or if you don't know, please try to find out some important facts about them. They are very important one. And the one who basically divided the work of art into these two categories, the psychological and the visionary, is none other than Carl Jung. Now, according to him, psychological art is the material drawn from the realm of human consciousness, or we can say day to day life, practical life, real life. While the visionary material includes those things that quantify great spans of time and basically separating us from pre-human time. So it is more from material of subconsciousness, memory, or we can say that is why it is visionary, because it is not happening in front of our eyes, but it is just a vision of the mind. Our next question, dear friends, is who wrote the essay The Name and Nature of Poetry, which criticizes neoclassical poetic practices, contending that the function of poetry is not transmission of thoughts but transfusion of emotions. We all know that there is a breach of theory between neoclassical and romantic writers. While neoclassical, they were more keen to present thoughts, transmission of thoughts with a logical, or we can say in a very rational manner, while the romantics were more prone to present their emotional states, their violent, their rage, their admiration, their love, everything in excess without paying any consideration for the rationality. So the poet who basically criticizes neoclassical dictum of poetry and favors the transfusion of emotions. Our options are W.B. Yeats, second one is A.E. Houseman, third one is W.H. Auden, and the last one is Robert Frost. These poets, though they belong to 20th century, somehow they have a streak of romanticism in their poetry. And the correct answer for this particular question, The Name and the Nature of Poetry, is written by A.E. Houseman, the mystic poet, who wrote The Rationale of Copy Text, which is a landmark essay in the field of textual criticism. Dear friends, textual criticism is that field, or we can say it is not rather a late addition to the fields of literary theory and criticism. In this particular branch, the critic tries to find traces, proofs of the correct text, and then try to interpret according to these particular various editions, various revisions, original tracks, first edition, later editions, and sometimes even handwritten manuscripts. Now, the rationale of copy text, it is a very important one. The options are Ronald B. McCarrow, second one is Walter W. Gregg, third one is Fredson Bowers, and the last option is G. Thomas Tansilli. These four critics, they all are very important critics. All of these are associated with textual criticism. But the one who basically wrote this rationale of copy text and actually criticizes the approach of copy text is Walter W. Gregg. It was the publication of this essay which changed the course of textual criticism. It was the term itself, the copy text. The term itself was coined by Ronald McCarrow, and by copy text he meant an earlier copy of a text which can become the base for an editor to interpret a work. Gregg was actually against heavy reliance on such which seems to be authentic copy, but he was totally against heavy and total reliance on such copy texts. who wrote The Philosophy of Composition, The Poetic Principle, and in these essay criticizing Heresy of Didactic, with writers like Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. So Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was an American romantic poet who basically tries to preach, to sermonize in his poetry, and this quality was criticized by this particular poet critic, calling it heresy of didactic. Now the options are Walt Whitman, Henry James, E. A. Edgar Allan Poe, and Emerson. These are prophetic poet, and Henry James, he is a writer critic, novelist critic I would say, while Whitman, Poe and Emerson, they all contributed to the romantic revival in American literature. The writer who wrote these famous essays and coined this term is Edgar Allan Poe in his The Philosophy of Composition essay, and this essay basically traces the logical progression of his creation of his famous poem The Raven, because he wanted to compose a poem that should suit at once the popular and critical taste. So he thinks that writers like Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, they only cater for the critical taste, they try to sermonize, while he is writing a poem which appeals to the sense and emotion of the common people also. Which term was borrowed by Gilles Deleuze and Guattari from French writer Antonin Artaud to refer to dimensions of a schizophrenic body. In fact, Deleuze himself in the beginning and later with Guattari has worked on the concept of schizophrenia and drug addicts, and then he took this term to point out his concept. The first is rhizome, second one is nomad, third one is phase space, and the last one is body without organs, or BWO. All four terms have been given by these two famous psychoanalytic critics, but the one they have borrowed from Antonin Artaud is body without organs, which Artaud has used in one of his plays, and by this term they actually mean the unregulated potential of a body without organizational structures imposed on its constituent parts and which operates freely. For example, they wanted to point out that in a schizophrenic person, the control of organs, which makes a body a composite, is not accurate, and body becomes without organ much liberated. Same thing happens with drug addicts. So this is basically their term. Which of the following book author pairs is not correctly matched? The first is The Subject of Tragedy, and the author is Catherine Balsay. Second is Historicism, and the author is Paul Hamilton. Third one is In Other Worlds, Essays in Cultural Poetics, Gayatri Spivak. And the last is Sexual Dissidence, Augustine to Wilde, Fry to Foucault, and the author is Alan Sinfield. And I must tell you that out of these four options, these four books are associated with the branch of New Historicism, and the one which is not correct is Sexual Dissidence, Augustine to Wilde, Fry to Foucault. It is not written by Alan Sinfield, rather it is written by Jonathan Dollimore. And if we talk about famous books by Alan Sinfield, you may remember this very important book, Fault Lines, Cultural Materialism and the Politics of Dissident Reading. Okay dear friends, that was all in this session of 11 questions, where once again we talked some advanced level question which will help you in your clearing of not only NET but making your prospect of JRF brighter. Keep reading, keep improving your English knowledge and skills, and keep supporting the channel. Thank you friends.